Last Wednesday, a historic summit between the President of the United States, Donald Trump, and Vladimir Putin, the President of Russia. It happened in Alaska. And you had the lead up, the actual meeting where we don't really know what happened, and then you have the coverage that has since come, and now later today you're going to have a meeting in Washington, D.C., with the President of the United States, the President of Ukraine, and a whole bunch of European leaders there as well. Mike McKenna joins us this morning. He is President at MWR Strategies and a columnist with the Washington Times. Mike, good morning.
Good morning. How you doing?
Doing well. Really appreciate some of your time this morning. One of the things that has struck me since the summit in Alaska on Wednesday has been this this need, and I understand the need for media to ask questions, but this angst that is rolled into this is what they said in the meeting, and this is what the United States conceded, and this is what they gave to Russia. The administration has been pretty buttoned up on what was actually discussed in the meetings, and it feels like there's a lot of jumping to conclusions about what did and didn't happen from people that weren't there.
Yeah, there's a lot of nonsense that goes on with these things. A simple way to think about it is it took us 2 years to get to peace in Vietnam, right? In a war that lasted not quite as long, but these things are not easy, right? And the idea that you have some insight into it if you're not actually sitting in the room when people are talking is just crazy. You just don't, right? You know what they tell you in press conferences. And I thought the president was pretty clear in his press conference on the way back. He said, look, this is the first step in a long process, and, we're probably going to need to talk about a ceasefire. We're probably going to need to talk about some land, and we're going to need to talk about, some guarantees that Ukraine's not going to be invaded again. I'm not sure how he could have been clearer, to be honest with you.
Well, and I go back to the interview that he did on Air Force One with Brett Baer before the meeting began, where he kind of laid out his plan going into the meeting, and he said, look, there's going to be a second meeting. This is a first meeting. Zelensky has to be part of any discussions because we are not negotiating for Ukraine. They're going to have to negotiate that on themselves. It feels like the whole "I'll walk out of the meeting" was taken out of context. What was the president's point? Not if Vladimir is not engaging, then I'll walk out. If this just feels like a complete waste of time, as opposed to if we don't get a ceasefire today, then I'm going to walk out.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. He definitely said, look, if this thing's a bust, I'm going to know within the first couple of minutes. And the fact that they stayed for 3 hours and had a joint press conference after it was all over, and like you say, he talked to the folks on the flight back home, tells you that he didn't think it was a bust, that it's a process and it's going to take a while. And, again, these things are not easy. I mean, Russia invaded Ukraine for land and to make sure that it didn't join NATO. And, those are sort of things we're going to have to work through. And, President this is not his first rodeo as far as deals, right? So he sort of has a sense of the tempo of these things.
I am curious about the press conference afterward. There's been a lot of talk about the staff members had long looks on their face. I think it was Peter Alexander that said there was an ashen look on the face. Whatever. The thing that I'm curious about was the actual mechanics of the press conference, and I'm wondering if Vladimir Putin went with a little bit of a power play where they got to the podium and he just started talking. Do you believe that was the plan initially, or do you believe that Donald Trump was the person that was supposed to speak first?
I'm pretty sure the president was supposed to speak first, and Putin is what he is, right? He's a terrible person with a pretty good skill set as far as propaganda, and that's and you saw that in Alaska, right? And I give the president full credit. He didn't jump right on him. He just kind of let him finish and said, all right, now that you got that out of your system, let's get to the real stuff.
Yeah. Where does this meeting go today? It was, I guess, Marco Rubio yesterday. He kind of made the rounds on the morning talk shows. And I don't remember if it was Kristen Welker or Margaret Brennan who talked about the European leaders coming in as like a buffer for Zelensky, so he didn't get it wasn't treated the same way he was the last time he was in the Oval Office. And Rubio pushed back. He said, "We invited the Europeans to this meeting." Do you believe that to be true?
Yeah, I do. Let's put it this way: nobody shows up at one of these things uninvited. So, definitely the Secretary of State invited these people to the meeting, and the reason why they were invited to the meeting was to be read into what's going on and to offer whatever advice and counsel they have. But the bottom line is that the United States is driving this thing, and Ukraine is obviously very involved, and the rest of these folks are for the most part bystanders. And I don't mean to minimize the European contribution here, but minimizing it is probably the smart thing to do.
To me, there is significance, though, to what happened in the NATO negotiations not too terribly long ago, where the European countries agreed to go up to 5% of GDP. And Trump has said for a number of years now, hey, we're not going to keep funding this entire thing. When we talk about security guarantees, along those same lines, with Europe saying, okay, we will capitulate here, we will go to a higher investment into NATO, does that put them in a spot where they're not going to have any choice but to go into a higher investment with these security guarantees for the European Union, the European countries that are closer to Ukraine than maybe they would have before?
Yeah, that's a great point, and I think you're completely right. That's exactly how this world's going to wind up. Whatever security guarantees happen, it's not going to be just the United States. It's going to be the Europeans who are on the hook as well. And honestly, that's a different place for them to be, right? They've been relying on American firepower since the end of the war, 80 years ago. So I'm kind of looking forward to today. I want to see what they're going to say coming out of it. And I'm very much looking forward to the idea of security guarantees involving Europeans as well, because that's important, right? It's important. It's important that these folks, grow up and move out of their parents' basement.
That's an interesting way to put it. I think a good way to put it. I don't want to give Donald Trump too much credit here. I think the staff that he has put together, starting with Susie Wiles, honestly, but with J.D. Vance, with Marco Rubio, with the entire crew, they had a plan going in. If you look at the linear progression from the day President Trump took office with some of the executive orders he signed, there are a number of things, and I kind of go to what I was saying with the NATO agreements a second ago. It was like those NATO agreements may have laid the foundation for how some of these negotiations are going to go with Europe. Is there a master plan where the things that have happened and the order in which they have happened since Inauguration Day have been linear and have been by design, or is some of that just kind of falling into place by happenstance?
Yeah, some of it is a plan, right? And the plan is pretty simple. It's time to figure out a way to completely harness the economic power of Europe, right? And that means you guys are going to have to spend some more of your money on the military, right? The United States can't be writing blank checks for the rest of our natural lives with respect to Europe. So that was that. And I think the other thing is the Ukraine thing with respect to what's not on plan, what's sort of driven by events. That's Ukraine, right? I think the president hoped that the Russians would change their modus operandi when he got in, and they didn't right away. And if you notice, he kept giving him more time. He said, hey, 2 weeks or 6 weeks or whatever. I think at some point a month ago, the president said, okay, this is obviously not going to happen on its own. We're going to have to force the issue. And that's when the issue started to get forced. And love the president, hate the president.
Do you believe that kind of final, okay, I'm not giving you 2 months, 60 days, whatever, it's 11 days, and the countdown is on. Do you believe that ultimately forced the summit in Alaska?
Yeah. I think the president had made up his mind before that, hey, they're at a second chance. The Russians now are at a second chance. We need to get serious about this, and we need to drive this issue, right? And like I said, love the president, hate the president. When he feels like doing something, he kind of clears the way out, right? And he gets it done. So, and that's you see it right away, right? The pickup in tempo. We're going to have this meeting in Alaska. We're going to have this meeting in D.C. And my guess is we're going to have another meeting right off the meeting in D.C. today, right? So,
Mike McKenna is president of MWR Strategies. Anytime there's a summit, one of the things that people talk about is optics. And there are a lot of people that didn't like the optics of the red carpet being rolled out. There are a lot of people that didn't like the optics of the handshake and the seemingly friendly demeanor between world leaders. But to me, the optic that stood out the most was when they were walking down that red carpet. You had the B-50 or the B-2 flyover. flanked by the F-22s. You had the F-35s on the base with all the military backdrop. That felt like about as big a flex. And if you watched Putin's reaction, he kind of jolted and looked up, and it was like Donald Trump never even broke stride when that happened. What did you make of that look?
I agree 100%. The rest of it was immaterial. That whole thing was about the flyover, and Putin got the message clearly, right?
He certainly did, I think. I guess we'll see in the days to come. Mike McKenna, MWR Strategies. He's the president there, writes columns with the Washington Times as well. Mike, thanks so much for your time. Enjoyed the visit. Hope we can do it again soon.
Amen. Thanks, brother.
Mornings with Richard Cross, SuperTalk, Mississippi. Mike's operated in this political stratosphere for a while and brings really good insight. We got more coming up with you. We'll wrap up the 7 o'clock hour next on MRC.